here some new faces and some long faces. Old faces. I thought I was going to say old faces. So welcome. This is the last event on the series on Puerto Rico that we instituted this year, and it's also the last, not the next to the last event for the center for the year. And after this event, right there in the lobby, we're going to have Puerto Rican food to celebrate the end of the semester and the conclusion of the series for this semester. Okay, and this is the last event. It's tomorrow on, this is a pity with another crisis. Friday. Friday. This is another crisis, it's the crisis on Garcia. Friday at 1 in Thompson 901. And it's about receivables one. So it's a pity that we have to be having two events based on that. Okay. So, Empire, Nakedness, Financial Colonialism, and the Oversight Board over Puerto Rico is part of our Puerto Rico at Crossroad series. We have two special guests, Emilio Pantojas Garcia and Hugo Delgado Marti. They will be introducing more detail further on by the two facilitators from UMass, Professor Roberto Alejandro and Professor Agustin from Political Science and from Sociology. And I cannot begin the event without thanking our co-sponsors, because then they won't give us money. The Department of Political Sciences, the History Department, the Department of Communication, Spanish and Portuguese unit of the Language, Literatures and Cultures Department, and the 5 College Latin American, Caribbean, and Latino Studies Council. And I also need to thank our art assistants that work for us very well, Caroline Frau Parker and David Ruiman.
Well, thanks to the...
I also have to say that Sonia sends her excuses because she had a small medical procedure and she couldn't make it.
Well, I will say again, as we said in our last event, first event at the beginning of the semester, that this is a part of an effort that we are making here, the surviving Puerto Rican professors and students at the university, in new epoch in Puerto Rican studies here, which is shrinking, and I want to use that language because the crisis of Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans is here also. And it's really refreshing to see a lot of people here. A lot of people from the academic community and a lot of people from the outside community from the university. And we are trying to revive Puerto Rican studies and a real connection with Puerto Rican communities outside of the university by a research program of Puerto Rican studies in here, and this is part of that. We are also trying to launch a program in Puerto Rico, a summer program. So we welcome all your solidarity and participation in this process. So I am honored here to present Professor Emilio Pantojas, who's here from the University of Puerto Rico. He's a senior researcher at the Center for Social Research at the University of Puerto Rico. He was past president of the Puerto Rican Studies Association and has been director of the Center for Caribbean Research at the University of Puerto Rico. Also, he's published a lot of articles and books also. I mean, his book, Development Strategies as Ideology, I use it very often in my work because I think it's a remarkable piece of work. And this book here, Crónicas del Colapso, actually won an honorific mention of the Pen Club in Puerto Rico and is a bestseller. I actually had to wait until he brought it here to buy it because I've been in Puerto Rican bookstore 3 times and it was not there because people are buying it. And it's about the crisis in Puerto Rico today. Please welcome Professor Emilio.
I brought a PowerPoint, which is rather easy to get my feet.
The pointers.
See, she has a pointer.
Oh, okay, because I asked for a pointer. We're having technical problems.
Yeah.
Looks like the icon for your PowerPoint is behind.
It's behind, is that what it is? Okay. Can you move the icon? Can you move the icon from the, maybe we can move the icon from the, can you move the icon from the PowerPoint? Okay. Usually this works pretty well.
While they do that, this book is going to be here. Don't we have copies of
Okay, yeah, I managed to bring some copies of the book. The book will be for sale. Let me talk about the book for a second while we solve the desktop. It is in the desktop. Basically, what happened was the crisis. What was the crisis? Everyone saw the crisis coming. This is not new. The crisis had been there for 10 years. Everyone saw the crisis coming when they repealed Section 936 in 1996. I anticipated problems with the Puerto Rican model in 1995 when, there we go. I anticipated the problems when China became admitted to the World Trade Organization in 2001. One of the things that happened, just to give you a, and so all the signs were there. It was not difficult to predict that this will happen. And the question was, I'm going to ask 2 questions here. On the one hand, what happened? What are the causes of the crisis? And on the other hand, what is the issue with the federal board, which I think is this moving? Mm-hmm. How do I move this? Don't worry, I'll do it manually. Okay, we have a technological rival here. Okay, there we go. So here we go. This is the presentation. I'm going to talk about the best of both worlds, which is what people thought Commonwealth would be. What eroded the model of Commonwealth and Operation Bootstrap. Commonwealth is the political regime. Operation Bootstrap is the economic model. The collapse. What are the global causes? What are the local causes? I'll give you some statistics in pictures. I will not speak for a long time. And then I'll talk about the crisis of governance, because at the root of it, Puerto Rico's crisis is ultimately a crisis of governance, of bad governance. And then I'll talk about the control board, a little bit about the famous or the infamous 4900. 2 things that you need to know. You probably know it, but I will put it in your mind as premises to what I am going to say. Puerto Rico is a possession of the United States. Puerto Rico is an unincorporated territory that belongs to, but it is not a part of, the United States. What I say to my students is the following. My goatee is part of me. My shoes belong to me. Puerto Rico is the shoes of the United States. Congress holds total sovereignty over Puerto Rico. Congress taketh, Congress giveth away. After World War II, Puerto Rico became a model of self-rule without independence. If you remember, I was discussing this with Agustin yesterday. After World War II, the solution to World War II was global decolonization. Everyone had to break up their empires. The British, the French, the Americans said they didn't have an empire. But at the Yalta conference, Roosevelt said to Stalin, you need to leave Poland. And Stalin said, and are you leaving Puerto Rico? And what happened? They said, no, Puerto Rico is not the same as Poland. And what happened was that immediately after that, after World War II, Truman appointed the first Puerto Rican governor. That was the first reaction to that conversation. The second reaction to that conversation was the elective government. 1948, Puerto Rico had Congress passed and allowed Puerto Rico to pass a law to elect their own governor. So the first Puerto Rican governor in 1946, appointed by Truman, Jesus de Piñero, the first elected government, Luis Muñoz Marín. And then there came another process, the process enacted by Law 600, allowing Puerto Rico to draft their own constitution. It did not change anything in terms of the substantial relations, but it did change, and there is an article by a professor of the Harvard School of Law, Rupert Emerson, that said that there is a whole issue of the journal, the Academy of Political Science, the Journal of the Political Science. And in 1953, there was a whole issue dedicated to Commonwealth, and he said, this is mainly symbolic. The Commonwealth of the Constitution was a symbolic act. And this is why they remember Carl Friedrich, but they forgot Rupert Emerson. And so the Commonwealth Constitution became the land of the law, and as long as Congress allowed Puerto Rico to function as a self-ruling territory, everything went well, but Congress withheld the sovereignty. Aside from that, I think we jumped a little bit. Well, Puerto Rico was then presented, after that model of self-rule without independence, the Point 4 program. Point 4 is Point 4 of Truman, development and democracy. Puerto Rico was an example of development and democracy. Interestingly enough, Puerto Rico was such a model that, to give you an example, the father of the president of the Senate of Puerto Rico, the president of the Senate of Puerto Rico, his name is Eduardo Batia. That's an Indian name. This Indian man, Mohinder Batia, came from India to Puerto Rico to learn about this new model of development and democracy. And he married a Puerto Rican woman, and now the president of the Senate is his son. The first model of export-led industrialization, the maquiladoras that we talk about, it was experimented, it came up as a solution to Puerto Rico, export-led industrialization, as part of the bootstrap model. All Caribbean NITs, after World War II, became better than their neighbors, but not equal to what? To the metropolis. That is the model of Puerto Rico. If you look at the ranking of Puerto Rico before the crisis, in terms of World Economic Forum, Puerto Rico is number 34. There is no Latin American country or Caribbean country higher than Puerto Rico. And the model was promoted in Asia, Africa, and by USAID. There are translations of books on the Puerto Rican model of self-rule without independence in many Asian languages. The son of Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan told Teodoro Moscoso that he had read the book of the Pacific Revolution. So we were a model sold to Asia. South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore learned the model from USAID, not from Puerto Rico, from USAID. Do not confuse Puerto Rico with USAID. This is the front page of Time Magazine, Democracy's Laboratory, the showcase of democracy and development. Luis Muñoz Marin, 1958. What are the pillars of Commonwealth? Common citizenship, common market, common currency, common defense, political stability. The pillars of Operation Bootstrap. Tax holidays, both federal and local. Lower minimum wage, equal after 1979, but still, remember that the minimum wage in the United States is usually half of the average wage. In Puerto Rico, minimum wage is at the top. So even though Puerto Rico enjoys, technically speaking, a federal minimum wage equal to the United States, it is lower than the average wage in the United States. Lower fixed costs, this is in the past. Special preferences, at least we can talk later specifically about it. What eroded the model? Well, trade liberalization eroded the common market. First, the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, then the Maastricht Treaty, then NAFTA, then the World Trade Organization, China's accession. Puerto Rico had free access. The Puerto Rican goods produced in Puerto Rico by US companies or by any company had free access to the US market. Export-led industrialization was based on that free access. That free access is no longer exclusive to Puerto Rico. Loss of colonial preferences, competitive advantages were lost. Tax holidays, the repeal of Section 936 eroded Puerto Rico's Operation Bootstrap. Special preferences, let me give you an example on this. 2001, 1996, there is a repeal of Section 936. Does everyone understand here what Section 936 is?
Not necessarily.
No? Shall I explain it?
Yeah.
I'll explain it briefly. Section 936 provided tax-free treatment of profits created by US transnational corporations as long as they were deposited in Puerto Rico for a minimum of 5 years, and then upon repatriation they would pay 2% local income tax, called a toll gate tax, and no federal taxes. The island of Puerto Rico, the financial sector in Puerto Rico accumulated up to $16 billion in 936 deposits by the 1990s. Puerto Rico became literally a capital exporter. But it wasn't Puerto Rico, it was the transnational corporations in Puerto Rico. But these companies were making a very interesting move. For example, GD0 in Puerto Rico declared 150% of their income in 1976. Pepsi Cola declared 22% of their income in 1976. Can the 3 million Puerto Ricans drink 20% of Pepsi in the world? Does that make sense to you? Doesn't make sense. Well, what happened was, you develop a patent in the United States, you take a tax break. You sell that patent to the Puerto Rican subsidiary of GD0 or Pepsi Cola, and then you collect the royalties and the profits on the selling of the syrup or the medicine in Puerto Rico, and you declare them as profit in Puerto Rico. You put them in the bank. 5 years later, you move it, and it's tax free. In the meantime, you did get a tax break in developing the patent, which the federal government expected to recover when you develop the medicine, and then they got the tax-free treatment. That was Puerto Rico. What happened? They repealed 936 corporations. And at the same time comes China into the World Trade Organization. The companies remained in Puerto Rico because there was a restriction on medicines. Everyone knows what phytosanitary rules are. These are health regulations. Health regulations in the United States, until the World Trade Organization, required all medicines that were consumed in the United States to be manufactured in the phytosanitary or the health system within the United States, FDA control. Now, because of the World Trade Organization rules, every company had to be treated as a national company. So FDA goes to China, certifies the plant, and they can export under the same terms as Puerto Rico. And that caused Puerto Rico to go from number 1 in the competitive ranking, the global competitive ranking, to number 32 by 2014. This is the fall. Number 1 in 1990. The year after 1990, after the repeal of Section 936, it fell to 22 immediately, and then it stopped there and reappeared in the World Economic Forum 36, 32. And this is what happened. After 2006, when finally 936 was totally phased out, look at the growth rates. This is the growth rates by decades, this is the growth rates by stages. So this is the 936 economy, this is the Great Depression of Puerto Rico. This is what is happening since, again, 2005 is the watermark, the watershed. By the way, this line is produced automatically by the computer. I didn't know it existed. It comes from Excel. So one day I'm tampering with Excel, and it says, "Do you want a tendency line?" And I said yes, and this is what came out. I totalized it. I didn't know what I was doing. Machine is intelligent. Same thing with real growth internal fixed investment. It's been falling. This is the economic activity index of Puerto Rico. And you can see that it went up between 1912 and 1913, and it came back down below 0. In the meantime, while all these things are going down, debt is increasing at a rate of what? 9% per year. So the economy is sliding down, debt is growing at 9% per year. And this is only until 2010. It grew until 2013, and then it didn't grow anymore. Population. The Puerto Rican population, throughout the crisis, 273,000 people have left Puerto Rico. In 2014, 89,000 left. In 2015, 65,000 people left. And this is from January to October. The numbers for December and November and December haven't been accounted. The projection in 2016 is that more than 100,000 people will leave. And the implications for the population of the crisis. These are foreclosures. Look at the foreclosures. About 5,000, 64,000, 7-year trend. These are families that have lost their homes. And as a result of the crisis, Puerto Rican have lost $60 billion worth of wealth. I live in a house that I bought during the crisis, and I thought I was making a killing. Now I owe more than I would owe if I sell my house. So I told my wife, we're renting the house from the bank, and if we want to retire, we will have to abandon this house and live with our Social Security and pension in a rented apartment. Fortunately, I have a niece that has an extra apartment, and I'm telling her, don't sell it, I will rent it from you when I retire. This is it. These are people losing their homes. And these are not just poor people, these are the upper middle classes. The causes of the collapse are trade liberalization, marginalization in the global value chains. Puerto Rico has been marginalized out of the global value chains. What is a global value chain? The global value chain is the global line that creates not only a product but creates value. Puerto Rico used to be inserted in the pharmaceutical value chain. It was expelled because its competitive advantage in that value chain was what? Was all those advantages that I told you about. They are now in China, they are now in India. You go to Bangalore, you can get the same product for better. Puerto Rico was out of that. I said that in about 2000. And people didn't pay attention to me. I'm a scholar, you know, people don't pay attention to scholars, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I can be ignored. I don't have a problem with that. It's not my ego. The only problem was that there was a fine detail that they should have known, that we had to reposition the economy. And I will tell you what we could have done later. But that was the problem. Puerto Rico not only has been but it's not only Puerto Rico. The whole Caribbean has been marginalized out of global value chains that have to do with the manufacturing of goods or with agriculture. What is the Caribbean? The Caribbean is an entertainment center. The great competitive advantage of the Caribbean is its natural resources. How long have I been speaking? Too much?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, there's another panelist. I don't want to. I believe I've been speaking for 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
20 minutes? I got 10 more minutes? Okay. We agreed to 30 minutes and I should abide. So, what are the causes of the collapse, the local causes of the collapse? The end of the single political party hegemony. The alternance, the two-party system in Puerto Rico hasn't been good, because there is discontinuity in policy. And, of course, public corruption and misadministration, and poor entrepreneurial and human infrastructure. If you look at the standards of governance by the World Bank, there is generalized public corruption in Puerto Rico. The FIFA, that's a kindergarten compared to Puerto Rico. FIFA people are nice. Low government effectiveness, lack of transparency and accountability. The federal government, Congress, the sovereign have been asking for audited reports, and in 2 years Puerto Rico have not produced it. I mean, we are talking about, you know, there is going to be a control board, and we're very indignant, but we have, the government of Puerto Rico has not produced the audited statements. I don't blame Congress. You want my money? Tell me what you, show me. Regulatory quality. It's a country of influence. It is a country of influence. But don't believe me. This is what the World Economic Forum says. The ranking of Puerto Rico is 32. When it comes to criteria on governance, public trust in politicians, Puerto Rico ranks 57. Infrastructure, 58. Transparency, 66. Macroeconomic environment, 99. Health and primary education, 103. Capacity to retain talent, 106. Government budget balance, 109. Total tax rate as percent of profits, 116. Business cost of crime and violence, 122. Burden of government and regulation, 130. This is the ranking, and this is a survey where most of the participants are businessmen. Favoritism in decisions of government, ranks 83. Wastefulness of government spending, 112. Legal scheme to favor party donors. Let me tell you what they are. Large-scale engineering projects, public relation contracts, consultant contracts, and land speculation schemes. Let me see if I put. I think I. These are the typical corruption schemes, and I will end with this. I will only say a few words. 1. Governor, the administration, Governor Rosselló, came up with the following scheme. There is a cap, there is a limit in Puerto Rico borrowing by constitution. But it says nothing that if the energy authority wants to borrow money to make a project, you guarantee it with what? With the income of that company. The energy authority charges for energy. So they indebted the energy authority, which is the worst. They constructed something called a Choliseo, which is a large coliseum. And they said, okay, the coliseum is going to charge. We will pay with the income. The only problem is that the coliseum, the urban train, all of that was built at extra cost. Every contractor, it was a pay-for-play scheme where 10% of the contract will be kicked back to the political party in power. So we have the most expensive Coliseum, the most expensive super aqueduct, the most expensive urban train. Sales tax, the EU. So came the Acevedo Vilá administration and they said, okay, we will resolve this with a sales tax. And they created a sales tax. Good. Called COFINA. And so the new debt will be guaranteed by the income from the sales tax called COFINA. Only problem is that Acevedo Vilá created something very nice. The northeastern corridor, which is a conservation area. Only problem was that he purchased the land from developers at 3 times its values. And then came our dear friend, Governor Fortunio, who participated also in the northeastern corridor. But he had another scheme. And he made contracts, he gave $9 billion worth of contracts in 4 years. The budget of Puerto Rico is $9 billion. So he spent the equivalent of 1 year in contracts, consultant contracts to engineering firms, consultant contracts to economists, consultant contracts to public relations firms. Let me tell you one story. I happened to, in 2011, I was invited to MIT to a conference of experts. Okay. And there was a, MIT is a nice place, no? Mm-hmm. And there was and there was a Puerto Rican who gave $1 million to do research. And so there was this luxurious reception with great wines and stuff like that. And I started talking to a guy who starts chiding me about the University of Puerto Rico not being fiscally responsible. And you know, the guy was a member of the fiscal board created by Fortunio to apply law number 7, which was a fiscal restraint law. And this guy is chiding me left and right, and I'm looking for help. You know, I want to leave this place. You know, yeah, I'm a professor. You cannot simply punch someone in the nose. You know, that would be the human reaction. I haven't punched anyone since I was 18, so I'm not going to start at 60. And so there I am, and I swallowed my pride. And as soon as I could, I left the conversation and went to my dinner. The problem is that this guy who was in the board that evaluated all projects resigns from the project, from the board. And then there is a project called Villa Verde, which is a gas pipeline that will go all through the south, through the north, through the center of the island, to go to the north, to bring gas. The guy gets the contract. But if that was not enough, you know what the thing this guy did with the contract as soon as he got it? He threw his girl, a 15-year-old, you know, el quinceañero. Everyone knows what a quinceañero is? $360,000 at the Ritz-Carlton. Villa Verde was never constructed. And so, I'll be brief, because my colleague is going to talk about that as well. What are we talking about? Promesa. I don't like the name. Puerto Rico Oversight Management. In Spanish, promesa means a promise. So, okay. I don't know what the promise is about. But what are the issues? Control versus supervision. The Democrats want supervision, a supervisory board. The Republicans want control board. Ability to impose restructuring. The Democrats want the board to have the ability to restructure the debt. The Republicans say, no way. Then the composition of the board. That was resolved. Now there are going to be 7 members. The scope and powers of and then there is an alternative being played around with the Creole finance board, control board. And who are the actors? Because, ¿cómo se dice todo contra todos in English?
Free for all.
It's a free for all. But the free for all is kind of liberal. No, it's everyone against everyone, literally. These people don't like each other. It's not a free for all. It's a free for all. Yeah, everyone against everyone. It's a hateful free for all. And you have the investment funds, which are the original bondholders, which are mutual funds, which are, you know. Then you have the Puerto Rican individual investors. There are Puerto Rican individuals. There are, you know, grannies and retirees which have lost about $250,000. That's not untrue. Then there are the Puerto Rican cooperative movement who sort of help the government by purchasing bonds. There are the hedge funds, which are the real evil people in the picture. There are the Republicans and the Democrats who are also playing politics. There is Congress, there is the executive, and there is the Supreme Court. They are all playing different roles. There is the PNP and there is the PPD. And so there are people in favor and people opposed to the moratorium. These are the actors. And that's the crux of the matter. That's what it's at play. The ball is rolling around and the thing is moving, the roulette is moving, and no one knows where the ball is going to fall because there are all these entanglements. I'll talk more to you the questions and answers. If you want to read about this, you should go to this. This is a Facebook page of the book, and you hit like and you get access to all the publications that I have there. There is one in English that summarizes this that just came out in December. So, Crónicas del Colapso. If you have a Facebook account, just type Crónicas del Colapso. It'll lead you there, and hit like and you will get access to the publications. Thank you.
So now we know what the Puerto Rican economy is. I am not going to use the American phrase. What the Puerto Rican economy is in deep trouble. And we will continue with Hugo Delgado Marti. He's the spokesperson for the Socialist workers movement in Puerto Rico, el movimiento socialista de los trabajadores. He's also a physics teacher at a vocational high school in Puerto Rico. I want to say something personal about this organization. The Socialist workers movement grew out of the Socialist popular movement, which was founded in 1974. The Socialist workers movement, MST, is an organization that has more than 4 decades of socialist struggles on the island. Its members played and continue playing an important role in the most important teacher organization in Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rico's Federation of Teachers, and some of its members held the presidency of that organization for close to a decade. The MST also has had an ongoing presence on college campuses, especially at the main campus of the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras. The student organization at the college level is the Socialist Youth Union, Unión de Juventudes Socialistas. I had the honor and privilege of being a founder member of both the Unión de Juventudes Socialistas and the Socialist Workers Movement, Movimiento Socialista de Trabajadores. At this moment, the MST is working toward the creation of political alternatives against the crisis of colonialism and neoliberalism in Puerto Rico. Without giving away my age, I have to say that I saw Hugo when he was still a toddler. Both his parents were teachers and members of the social workers movement, and I was a member of that organization. So it is very refreshing to have him with us today. It is also very encouraging to know that in a context defined by many organizational witnesses in Puerto Rico, the social collapse and the quality of life, which is very low. Several important manifestations of resistance and analysis in my home country as elicited and expressed by Professor Emilio Pantojas and by Hugo Delgado. Hugo Delgado is part of that resistance. It is a pleasure to introduce him to you this afternoon.
You may have already noticed, English is not my first language. I'm more used to speaking politics in Spanish. Actually, in English I'm good in physics, but not in politics. So I apologize for reading. That's the way I will try to keep my speech in time. I would like to begin thanking the organizers for bringing me here to speak about our views of the situation in Puerto Rico. Just as Roberto said, I'm a high school physics teacher, and as a matter of fact, Miguel Vocational High School, the school that I work in, was the birthplace of one of the key characters in the working class political theater for the last 40 years, which Roberto just mentioned, the Puerto Rico Teachers Federation. It was founded in Miguel Vocational High School. Right now, elections are being held for the selection of an exclusive representative of the teachers in Puerto Rico public system. Unfortunately, the only options teachers have in the election is to vote either yes or no for a bosses union and a business called the Puerto Rico Teachers Association. I expect to cast a vote of no this Friday, so that we do not end up having a second set of administrators. The reason I begin with this personal story, which may seem insignificant when compared to the state of the Puerto Rican economy, which is in depression, as the professor said, the default of $72 billion in public debt, the loss of nearly 300,000 jobs in 10 years, the reduction in population in the island due to emigration, the foreclosure epidemic, and the social and psychological effects of the crisis, is because I expect to talk not only of the crisis as seen by the numbers, but as seen by the social group that is most affected by the consequences of austerity and neoliberalism. If I were to choose a phrase to describe the current situation in our island, it will be the intensification of the level of exploitation of our working force and our natural resources. Exploitation has taken many faces: unemployment, low wage, subemployed and part-time workers, privatization, dismantling of the benefactor state, and many others. Today, austerity is being justified through the government financial crisis and public debt default, and enforced by the receivership of public authorities and institutions such as the Puerto Rico Electrical Power Authority by Lisa Donahue, and the destruction of the Puerto Rico Development Bank. Instead of going back in history to compile all the list of mistakes, corruption scandals, and incorrect policies, we should analyze what are the dominant aspects of the political and economic configuration in Puerto Rican society that got us here. Our crisis is not just an administrative issue, but a historical and political one. I mean it in the sense of accumulated inequality in the same way capital gets accumulated. The financial crisis of the central government is, in its roots, the most recent and evident symptom of hundreds of years of colonialism. To talk about the colonial status of Puerto Rico is now commonplace. As such, the word colony has been deprived of its meaning. The commonplace definition of the term of colony is taken as a territory that does not hold power over itself, but decisions are taken elsewhere in the imperial centers of power. The definition of the term puts a heavy toll on the legal and formal way in which a colonial relationship is understood. With that definition taken as absolute, statehood could be a solution to the colonial problem. As the 51st state of the Union, Puerto Ricans will participate in the election of the president, will choose its congressmen, and have equal participation on the political charade of Washington. Lack of sovereignty is one aspect of colonialism, but it's not the only one. Colonies in a mercantile society are a source of natural resources and wealth that gets produced and sold in the metropolitan imperial center, and manufactured and processed goods get sold back on the colonial territory. But that is not enough a definition either. Puerto Rico colonialism has to be studied differently, and not just as an ideological contradiction to democracy or as an affront towards our dignity, or even as a worthless status. Colonialism in Puerto Rico has a concrete and real meaning. Gigantic proportions of wealth have been produced in the last 118 years, and that wealth has left the island as fast as it got produced. Colonialism has a broad definition which encompasses many transverse aspects of culture, race, gender, ethnicity, and class. In order to trace the magnitude and scale of colonial oppression in Puerto Rico, you have to dig into the macroeconomic statistics. Some of them the professor has already shown us. Although the statistics in Puerto Rico have little reliability when observed in short terms due to the capitalist and colonialist bias, these numbers do show a measure of the change in value, profit, and even the productivity of the Puerto Rico working class in a longer time range. For example, net capital investments in fixed assets averaged $11 billion per year during the first 14 years of this century, 2000 to 2014. That amounts to $176 trillion in only 14 years. That investment returned well over 1.1 trillion years during the same time period, of which less than 410 billion were employee compensation, while the rest was profit. When we compare the profit rate of the manufacturing sector, we begin to see the scale of profit. Out of $538 billion generated in those 14 years, only 40 billion were paid to employees. In other words, workers earn today less than 8% of the product generated. By the way, employee compensation in manufacturing has remained nearly constant since 1996 at $4 billion per year. Even if we go back as far back as 1992, the yearly aggregate of employee compensation in manufacture was around $3 billion. But manufacture back then made only $11 billion. Back then, it was 27% of the profit. That means that while the manufacturer has received an increase in profit of 1,232%, salaries have remained the same. Those corporations have only paid the so-called Commonwealth, in total, in those 14 years, a little bit under $30 billion in taxes in that time span. Sila Maria Calderon even reduced the toll gate tax during her term. Taxes withheld to individuals in that time period is higher. It sums $38 billion. Add to that another $28 billion in excise taxes which are paid in goods during those 14 years, and another $5 billion since 2007 in sales tax. These taxes tend to hit heavily the poorest by increasing the cost of goods and therefore reducing the purchasing power of the labor force. In summary, working people pay to maintain the state while foreign corporations profit. The question is how much of the working class has benefited from this income. In the year 2000, nearly 1 million people had jobs out of 2.8 million aged 16 and older. Employment peaked in 2007 with 1.2 million when the working population reached 2.9. Since then, the population able to work has been estimated as decreasing at a rate of 6,000 persons per year. That number has become larger in the last years as the economic depression worsens. In the year 2014, only 995,000 workers had a job. That is a net loss of 269,000 in 7 years. If we look at the most recent numbers and take into account that low-wage workers may be counted twice or even 3 times, because if you have 2 part-time jobs that pay less than 1 job, you're still having 2 jobs, so you may be counted twice in the statistics. Across gender lines, the situation looks worse. The only group that has a majority employed are mid-aged male workers. All the other groups, less than 50% have jobs. Work in manufacture has also taken a hit. Manufactured jobs peaked in 1995 when Section 936 was being dismantled by Congress, with 172,000 jobs. That number reached 86,000 in 2014, a net loss of half the jobs in manufacture. This trend continues even today. The results from March came a few days, and it is in 72,000 jobs in the manufacture sector. Commerce and services have not seen such a reduction. Taken together, they have only lost 54,000 jobs of the nearly 600 jobs at its peak. The question we could ask is, if less people are working, are they paid more? The answer is yes and no. Some people are paid more, some people are paid less. And for some people, being paid more doesn't mean, or means a loss, actually, when you take into account the increases in the cost of living in Puerto Rico. The disparity in salaries has increased, and the total number of income paid to workers may be influenced by the higher echelons of the labor force, the highly specialized technicians, engineers, scientists, and professionals who are considered exempt from some of the labor protection laws. Even those who are being paid well over $70,000 a year may be losing when compared to similar positions here in the United States. But most importantly, these jobs require long hours, which destroys the quality of their lives. Even during depression, there is accumulation of wealth. The question is, on whose hands? Personal financial assets more than doubled in the 14 years we have been using as our benchmark. Personal debt also increased 17 to 22 billion in 14 years. Bankruptcy filings doubled between 2006 and 2014. Although total assets in banks went from 96 billion down to 55 billion during a 10-year time span, we shouldn't fall for the crybabies of La Milla de Oro. In that same 10-year time span, Banco Popular went from $13 billion to 22 and became the leading financial institution. Out of the 20 institutions that existed in 1996, today all capital is concentrated in 6, mostly in Banco Popular. In the past year, Citibank surpassed Popular as the leading institution when its asset increased from 11 billion to 26. I have not found a formal explanation for this other than the tax haven laws that the current governor enacted, which aims at giving tax breaks to billionaires who live in Puerto Rico and who now have boats inside their boats. And this is true. There's a huge boat yacht in San Juan that you can see another boat with him on the helicopter. And we may be suffering in Puerto Rico the consequences of the international crisis of capital. Nevertheless, in the colony, things are not so easy as to wait for the next spike of the wave. Wealth does not stay around in banks but abandons its premises. This is not the first time Puerto Rico has lived a similar situation, but only the massive investment of capital from the United States government and multinational corporations saved the day and drove a new tide of colonial exploitation. I have compared our current situation, just as you saw in the graphics, as a never-ending slide where the economy keeps sinking, but there doesn't seem to be an end at sight. The industrialization has taken place in several forms, which complement each other. Closing of manufacturers with the loss of employment, slowdown and reduction of the investment of capital, movement of financial capital outside of the island, emigration as a loss of human capital, but also as a loss of the investment the state made in education. Negative balance of payments, we import more than we consume. Reversal of the relationship between productive jobs versus retail jobs, where realization of value becomes more important than creation of value. Large increase in consumer debt and public debt. A smaller working force and less production makes for a smaller share of revenues from taxes, while the increases in the cost of living and the rights gained by the workers put a high stress on the government to cope with its obligations. The state has an important function within the contemporary capitalist society, and that is to guarantee the necessary conditions for production and the reproduction of capital. It does this by building and maintaining the physical infrastructure needed by the companies to operate. The state also provides the resources to maintain, train, and reproduce the working force through health, education, and housing. The state, particularly the colonial state, has to maintain social order and prevent social unrest, which keeps political stability and a welcoming environment to foreign corporations. Food stamps, public health insurance, and even forcing immigration become pressure release mechanism when combined with police repression and property protection turns the island into a paradise for exploitation. In order to pay for this configuration, Puerto Rico had to mortgage itself. Public debt has reached over $72 billion combined, but if the internal debt of the government is added, it could triple. For years, the government worked as a money printing machine, where the whole apparatus, even government-owned corporations, which are supposed to be separate entities, worked as a single treasury. The last few administrations sank themselves even deeper by delaying payment and due dates for principals. In May, the government has to make a payment of $422 million, and it may have to choose between paying that or paying the public workers. Treasury Department has been juggling with money by holding and releasing checks and expenditures day by day. Austerity and the neoliberal agenda has been present in the Puerto Rican political scene since the 1970s, when Carlos Romero Barceló of the New Progressive Party, PNP, privatized the first set of public hospitals and enacted tuition hikes in the University of Puerto Rico, and you can ask Roberto about that story. Since then, and following the recession of the 1970s, Puerto Rico working class lived a sustained attack towards their rights and working conditions. Right after the worst years of Romero and the Spider Government, came the election of Rafael Hernández Colón with privatization of the Puerto Rico Merchant Marine Authority, Navieras, and the international coal branch of the Puerto Rico Telephone Company. Thus began the destruction of public authorities and collapsed any expectation towards reinforcing state capitalism within the colony. Pedro Rosselló González enacted in full the neoliberal agenda when privatization of all public hospitals followed the attempt to privatize public schools, which was defeated by the strength of the teachers' union. The one-day teacher strike of 1993 managed to force significant amendments to the community schools law, which attempted to create basis for charter schools. To this day, the amended law, which grants autonomy to communities to govern public schools, has been under constant attack, but never implemented in full form in its most progressive aspects. The turn of the century closed with the last great stand against privatization, which was the strike against the sale of the Puerto Rico Telephone Company. The Puerto Rico Telephone Company did get privatized, not only because of the lack of strength within the working movement, but because of the nearsightedness of the leadership of the union. The strike, which had been called a people's strike, was much more than an economic strike, but a political one. Workers were not fighting to bargain with the new buyer, but to stop strategic attack towards the working class as a whole. After the retreat, retaliation from the state began. Law number 45 of 1999 was used not as a way to grant new rights and develop class organization, but to tame the untamed beast that had become some of the unions. Single and exclusive representation meant that dues and recognition from the state could be lost via desertification. Almost any type of resistance could be interpreted as having an adverse effect against services. So even picket lines during lunchtime were forbidden by some unions. The retaliation of the state did not end with law number 45. In 2002, the government dismantled the Puerto Rico Teachers Federation health plan due to an overdrawn balance sheet, lack of liquidity, and bad administrative practices. In 2003, a new leadership was elected with a program of democracy and class struggle. Anytime the new leadership of the FMPR developed or advanced in public opinion the health plan issue, or the attacks by the Teachers Association or the American Federation of Teachers increased with the aid of the colonial justice system. In 2004, Sewer and Aqueduct Authority Union leadership were indicted and later arrested due to corruption and racketeering. The Aqueduct Authority had been privatized with little to no resistance from the union leadership, and some of the opposition within the rank and file had to deal with both the bosses and the union working in tandem against them. The Power Authority workers received several hits in the head when two private power generating enterprises entered into the market and the government bought their power without a real need. Privatization took several forms within Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. Subcontractors for reparations and construction of new facilities, moving administrative and commercial duties to Banco Popular, and by increasing its debt to pay for corruption. Now, UTIER, the union, once one of the leading and most powerful and respected unions, has a diminished workforce and is having problems mobilizing their the rank and file. Years of repeating the best strike is the one that never comes have destroyed the will to fight within the union, and the absence of a politically organized sector has rendered their collective class consciousness almost non-existent. The effect of the depression have rendered the authorities' infrastructure obsolete. These were built to support the manufacture, and with the decrease of manufacturing sector, they have depended heavily on the increase in costs to the individual and commercial sectors. That meant increasing the cost of living, since commercial costs go right into the prices of goods also. The increase in cost to overcome this trend and to pay for inefficiencies, corruption, and debt has changed the public support of the unions in these branches of government into rejection. In 2004, Governor Acevedo Vila launched an attack towards all unions and the working class in order to protect those who financed his campaign and from the then foreseeable collapse of the Commonwealth finances. The alliance between a large portion of the nationalist and independence advocates and the Popular Democratic Party was forged to defeat any attempt at class struggle. Within days of his administration, tuition was hiked in the public university, which met resistance from the small but highly politicized student movement. Increases in the cost of water, power, and basic consumption goods were followed by the enactment of the sales tax as a way of creating a new fund that could provide the basis for even more public debt, called COFINA. The approval of the sales and services tax used mass movement in its favor, probably the only nation in the world that fought asking for more taxes. The movement, called El Pueblo Grita, was organized by the media and a few of the AFL-CIO unions, or as we like to call them, chupacuotas. The governor, who had the opposing party controlling the National Congress, used public workers as mingo, the white ball on the game of pool, when he closed the Department of Education for 2 weeks. The Puerto Rico Teachers Federation didn't have the strength at the time to respond. Teachers ran to the unemployment and food stamps offices instead of protesting. But there was a response that began on a cloudy day on the 1st of May, as the late Luis Angel Torres said a few days before. It will be unbearable if 70,000 workers are sent home without payment and not a single thing happens in here. Apparently, the students heard him. That day, storms rained